Newly stocked on the shelves is box number 512 with your hosts Aeon
and the Lioness,
Black,
trans
women,
women, and excellent.
and defying all life expectations.
The show begins
Now. Hey y'all, welcome back to box number 512 podcast, Grown Black Trans Women Talk. I'm Aeon.
And I'm the Lioness.
Girl.
How y'all doing? How you doing, girl?
Today is a good day. The weekend was kind of heavy. If you guys got to watch our impromptu live last night, we got to talk a little bit about how we both have been processing the grief and delving into joy from this past weekend, from the deaths of our fallen sisters to the Supreme Court ruling that came out on Monday. So this weekend, it's just been a mixed bag of emotions, but today is a light day. It's a better day. So, and
talk a little bit about the drag march, sis. My sis had the pleasure of going to a drag march in Chicago. How was it?
It was good. I mean, I can't really talk about it because I really feel like I went, but it wasn't like, by the time I got there, they had already marched. So it was just like, oh no. But one of my friends, shout out to my baby Martez, got me up out of the house. And I think it was more important for me to just go out there and be with the people and be out of the house. I really wasn't like close enough to the stage, and they didn't have like any speakers to amplify what they were saying, so I really couldn't hear anything. But it was important for me to just get out of the house and be around the people, and to also organize around Black queer people.
Right.
Where a space I felt safe and I ain't have to worry about getting attacked or getting jumped. And so it was really nice to get me up out of the house on Sunday. What about you?
You know what? Same. This weekend was about joy for me. I caught up on some of my favorite shows. We did an Insecure breakdown on last night on our live show, and that was fun to do. So that was something that gave me a little bit of joy. I was able to have some good conversations with some other my sisters. I did a live with Tilt, Trans Individuals Living Their Truth, the organization that I'm the executive director of here in Atlanta. And we did a live broadcast with my sister, Toya Washington, who's also an advocate who lives here and in Birmingham, and she works with two different organizations. So yeah, I love her down. It was just a beautiful weekend. And so, yeah, girl, and amidst all of the horror, amidst the tension from the protesting, there were victories.
Right. No, yeah, there were victories, and hopefully there will be many more victories. And I know for me, throughout all of the tragedy, I just feel encouraged that we as a community are moving in the right direction. Also, the march the big march that they had in Brooklyn, New York, that was led for Black trans people, and the All Black Lives Matter march in LA, where it was largely centered and ran by Black trans and queer people. Like, stuff like that just gives me hope that the work that all of us is doing is just not in vain. So
right.
It's all about the practice of taking the good with the bad and just processing the grief, but not letting it keep you down, because there's still so much work to do, and there's just so many goals that we have to accomplish, and dismantling the system and creating freedom for all of us. So I guess to start, well, before we get into starting things on a lighter note, definitely want to remind you guys if you want to become a sponsor of our podcast, you may do so by becoming a monthly sponsor through our Anchor page. You can donate for as little as $1 a month. Any monies that you donate to the show goes directly back into the show, so we can pay for equipment, so we can pay to use the technology, because doing this is not free. Recording it and doing the live streams are not free. And also, you should want to support Black trans people while they're living and thriving, and not waiting until we die or something happens to us to support us so we can continue to do work that continues to liberate and connect communities. So transitioning.
Shout out to our YouTube listeners. Shout out to all of the listeners on the different platforms.
Right.
Feel free to signal boost what we do. That's another way you can support. So that means like, follow, click the bell, do all the things you need to do so that you can really, really let the world know that you really support us, and that'll move us up in algorithms, and hopefully, we'll be able to get our following up. So yes, thank you.
Right. And shout out to Room Magazine last week. They feature us on the list of Black and queer podcasts to listen to.
Weren't you honored?
Yeah, because we're newbies. We're newbies in the game. We're very new. We're very fresh, very dedicated, but very new. But it was great to be listed among other podcasts that are well known and well respected. So it's just confirmation that we're doing us and we're doing the right things, and that people are seeing the work that we're doing. So definitely.
And the time is now. Yes.
All Stars motherfucking 5, bitch. Ooh. I am so excited about this show, bitch. This is going to be a good season. This is going to be a good season. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start with this?
Girl, you do the breakdown, and I give the exciting commentary, Miss Thing.
Well, well, I don't even know what to break down because we're only 2 episodes in, but I just feel like this cast of girls is a really good cast of girls.
Are you surprised that Angina went home?
I kind of am, but I kind of get why that she went home. I feel like a lot of girls come to All Stars thinking that it's like the original run of their season. It's like, no, sis, you come to All Stars to play the game.
Right, it's supposed to be a reinvention, bitch.
Right, and I felt like because it had been so long since she had been on Drag Race, period, she thought like the nostalgia of her being there would be enough to carry her through. It's like, no, sis, when you come to All Stars, honey, you have to come to play.
Because all these girls have nostalgia. That's why she brought them back, man.
Right, and I just feel like she let the competition get the best of her. I feel like
I agree. She was in her head from the very beginning. It was almost like she had psyched herself out. And I think when she was on the show, that's the thing about being on these shows that you may have gotten on early and now she got a big budget. I don't think she realized how much her drag had to step up.
Right.
Like beyond just being sickening and giving a look, bitch. She really was like, you have to be a multi-talented artist. There are going to be recordings. There are going to be dances, bitch. There are going to be a stage show. It's like really trying to go on Broadway now to be on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Right.
I feel like these girls won't be prepared for that.
Right. And when I think of All Stars, bitch, I think of runways, bitch. Your runway has got to be on point, bitch, because and also I feel like throughout all of the All Stars, with the exception of season 1, if you were a real shaky girl during your original season, you can't then come back to All Stars and be a shaky girl because you don't have the benefit of relying on the lip sync for your life to carry you over.
Exactly, because this is really dancing people. What do you think about the new rules?
I think it's a cute twist. I feel like I get the impression that they're not really bringing the lip sync assassin girls that are truly lip sync assassins that have been on the show, i.e. a majority of the Black queens that have been on that show.
Sorry.
I just think, I think they're doing it just to cycle through fan favorites to get them more screen time. But I'm like, Miss Thing, if you're going to give me a lip sync assassin, bitch, give me a lip sync assassin. Like, I want to see Coco. I want to see Raja O'Hara. I want to see the Kennedy David. And there's no shade to Alyssa Edwards, but I don't think of her or Evie Oddly as lip sync assassin. Like, give me what I signed up for. Don't like.
Now Evie, I didn't see her necessarily as a lip sync assassin. but I did. But that bitch will. I feel like, no shade. I feel like Evie gets kind of is able to be more of a all around kind of like artist when she does hers more than it's about her lips. Right. But I feel like she did that lip sync the other week, Miss Thing.
She turned it out. She turned it out, but I would like when you say lip sync assassin, I wouldn't have thought of Evie Oddly. And then when she was on her season, she like excluding the finale, she was only in the bottom 2 one time when she lip synced against Brooklyn Heights. So, now, but
a fierce battle even then. But I get what you're saying. That's not an assassin. Assassin is the bitch that may not have been the best girl, but she sent bitches home.
Right. Who was from Evie's season was Raja O'Hara.
No shade.
Because Miss Thing was in the bottom like 4 times, bitch. Like, it was no shade. But other than that, I'm excited for the show. That runway from last week, bitch, I was gagging. First of from the runway song.
How you feel about how Shay did? Shay Coulee.
Black excellence, Miss Thing. Like Black excellence. I live for it from the back of the runway to the front to the side. Like Shay is one of those girls. Like I kind of feel like Shay is going to win this season.
I do too.
Because she's just one of them girls. She's just so confident, and she just
and like, you can't beat that polish.
Right. She's just so and the people want her to win. I honestly, I feel like she's going to be in the top 4. I feel like Mariah. I'm not Mariah. Alexis
Mateo.
Alexis Mateo is going to be a top 4 girl. I don't know. Those are the only 2 that I can really say for sure. Because Alexis
I hate to say it. I think Miss Cracker could pull it.
It could, but they're giving Miss Cracker the villain edit, and Miss Cracker's aesthetic, it just doesn't do it for me. Like on the runway last week, her little Jewish princess, it looked laid. Like it looked laid. It looked laid. It was not flattering. I didn't like the hair. It was just, it just was not cute. It was not appealing to me.
What do you think about Miss, what's her name? I'm trying to think. Jujubee, Miss Jujubee.
Oh, top 4. She's gonna be in the top 4. I forgot about you. I live for Jujubee because Jujubee just looks cunt. She just looks like Laotian, Banji cunt.
She do give you that. She give you dark skinned Asian cunt, like for real.
Right. I definitely see Jujubee in the top 4. But the only thing is like every time Jujubee is on a season, she's never the girl that wins the challenge. She's either the girl that's in the bottom or the girl that scores high but never wins the challenge. And then when you have a girl like Shay out there, it's like, is Juju going to be able to do enough to outshine Shay? So, but I love Jujubee. She looked gorgeous on the only critique I have about her runway, I kind of felt like it was too basic. Like it looked amazing, but for All Stars, it looked too basic for me. But I still live for the aesthetic and what she was given. One of the surprises for me has been Miss India Farah.
Yes, ma'am.
Because she really did it. I remember watching her on her season. And also I have this app called Pluto, which is like free cable, but they have a RuPaul's Drag Race station, which they play like all the classic RuPaul seasons. So like seasons 1 through 5. And I've seen her season 3 since we've been in quarantine multiple times. She really didn't do well on her season. So to see her come out the gate and win, and I like the way India paints, because India paints like a black drag queen. It's a very like intense contours and it's very intense. So I like India.
Like I feel like she has a black drag mom.
Right. I'm like there's somebody black in there, because the way that you paint, bitch, she paints like she is going to go sing, and I'm telling you, I'm not leaving, bitch. She paints for the neck and the neck, honey.
Yes, ma'am. She painted like the old girl.
Right. Like it's the very like I'm a drag queen. But I love the runway. I love the runway. I'm loving the season. My only complaint about the season is RuPaul's gowns. They look horrible. They look a mess. It's like it's just like why, like why?
Critique. He had that same critique. He was like, I don't care for. He didn't care for her gowns to be real on the last regular sequel.
Right. It's like it's something wrong. Did you fall out with somebody or what's going on? Because yeah, you're right. Even on the last season, no shade. Actually, the last two regular seasons of Drag Race, her looks have just been kind of off. And I've never really understood like why she like you know how Tyra used to do when they went into critiques like they would have a challenge and then she would take a picture of the same challenge as like the teacher. Like I never understood why RuPaul doesn't wear something that's reflective of the theme of the runway for that week's episode. Like I just never have understood that.
You know what, bitch? That is no shade. That's a good point. Like if it's Ru Excellence or whatever, then she picks her favorite Ru Excellence moment. If it's whatever, if it's a nautical theme, bitch, you be nautical. That's a good point, sis.
Right. I just don't like it. It just seemed like the dresses, like the dresses are just bad. Like the cuts, the color choices, the fabric, and then the wig.
It's more fabric and flow of garment. It gives some of these have looked like PVC, like Miss Thing. That don't even look like a material, Miss Thing.
and then like the wigs just sometimes the wigs be on point, and then other times it's like why is the hairline so harsh, or why is the hairline so far back?
Sometimes you be like, oh, it's cute, and sometimes you look at it, you go, wig, bitch, on site, bitch, like wig. And RuPaul, at least from my memory, was always legendary to me for her way her units laid.
Right. It's yeah. I don't. Something's going on. The face is on point. The face is the best it has ever looked, but she needs to pull that together because that dress from last week's runway. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like it just like the colors don't even like. And I was trying to make it make sense with the red sequins and the turquoise and the fuchsia, and the bow, and I was just like. So we just not even going to act like we on camera. Okay.
Because that gave me very much. She should have just took that dress on the road and gave it at one of her shows.
Right.
Primetime TV dress rule. I know you got better.
Right. Yeah. But other than that, I think this is going to be a great. Oh, I forgot about Miss Blair, motherfucking St. Clair, bitch.
Blair St. Clair.
Another bitch that looks like she's been learning from Black Queens, or she got so like just the way she. That little thing is kind. That little thing is kind. She looked amazing. Even though her runway last week it divided people, I got where she was coming from with her.
Ru wanted this to be the fish season though, because none of these girls really were like the chop, except for the chop on their season.
Right.
Like she wanted them to be. What I mean is like appearance wise, because sometimes Ru can kind of gravitate for the artsy girls, the artsy fartsy girls. I feel like this season she really wanted it to be kind of like a glam, or at least girls that could kind of give, like you said, the one that's really dropping the ball kind of right now was Miss Cracker, but for the most part, she was trying to go for girls that was kind.
Right. No, all of these girls this season are kind, and I look forward to continuing watching this season. It brings me a lot of joy. Like I said, I live for the runway song. And I just want them RuPaul gowns to improve because at this point it's no excuse, and you can't tell me that people aren't like throwing you designs and so you're choosing to go out there and look crazy, like you're choosing it.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
But it's like this is a choice.
I know you see it because you're used to critiquing people. What's the tea?
Right. Michelle, do you need to have a private conversation with your sis, honey? Because This is not the tea. This is not the tea. But pivoting to our next topic today. Today's episode.
Can I do the lead in and then you go take it from there?
Sure.
So this next topic today, it was very important that we address the one of the victories, and I am privileged to be able to do this podcast with someone that I think is a dope trans woman. One, because she's committed to the work, and she's definitely committed to making sure that she, at least even before this podcast, she was the sister that I could always count on, that would give me the breakdowns for things, that would help me understand legal precedent. And she was always updating me as cases went on, particularly this case. And so my sisters are going to talk to you a little bit about the Supreme Court decision, and she's going to break it down. And I'm very excited for her to do this. And we wanted to take time to do this today because we're aware that we are unique, and that my sister's unique skill set in this moment is necessary. It's nothing like having it broken down home from your own by your own. And we have the privilege of having a trans attorney here. And so, Brianna, take it away, darling.
So, like the Lioness said, the community, we are all happy because we got a favorable decision in the Supreme Court case. Now a landmark Supreme Court decision that says that transgender and gay people are covered under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I feel like we discussed this on a previous episode, but what happened in this case is, this Supreme Court case is, it was we didn't just talk about it. What happened was that one of the plaintiffs, Amy Stevens, a trans woman who transitioned on her job at a funeral home, and she was fired after she transitioned. She passed away like a couple weeks ago. So she passed before the Supreme Court delivered a decision on her case. But basically how this case came about is it was a consolidation of 3 individual cases. So it was a trans woman, and it was a gay man, and I believe another gay man. But the cases essentially asked the same question: are trans and gay people covered under Title VII? Because what happened in all of the cases is that these queer individuals were fired from their jobs when it was revealed that they were gay or trans. And also, so typically, why this particular case or these cases went to the Supreme Court is that there was a circuit split in how to interpret this question. So you had some circuits in the federal circuit that said that trans and or LGBTQ people can bring claims of sex discrimination under Title VII. But then you had some circuits, which were in more conservative areas, that said that no, you can't bring LGBT claims of discrimination under Title VII because LGBTQ people are not covered under sex. So let's backtrack. Let's go back to what the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, says. So basically, this was the law that was created in 1964, and it says that in the areas of employment, employers cannot discriminate on the basis of race, sex, or any other protected categories enumerated in the statute. So, and whenever you are working for a big company, because there are requirements in order to bring a claim under the statute, but whenever you bring a claim, the discrimination has to be based on one of those protected categories, typically race, and in this case, sex. So pivoting back to what I previously said, there was a circuit split where some circuits said, yes, they can bring these claims. And then there are other circuits that said, no, we can't bring these claims. So basically how the federal court system works, the Supreme Court only accepts cases when they are attempting to resolve some type of circuit split or resolve a dispute on how laws should be interpreted. So that's why this case was so big, because the Supreme Court has never asked this question. And the beauty of this case and why it's such a big deal for our community is that because the Supreme Court has held that yes, Title VII does protect LGBTQ people under the classification of sex. What this means is that now in all 50 states, if you are clearly discriminated against because you are trans or you are gay, that in all 50 states, you can bring a claim in federal court for sex discrimination.
How does that affect local laws and states and places where people have this, that have given permission for people to do that?
Well, I think it doesn't. Well, what it does for local laws is it gives folks a way. Like for instance, in Mississippi, and I don't know if we talked about this on a show, but there was a story that came out before this decision came out when the woman was refused a job from the Applebee's because the hiring manager found out she was trans. What it does is that now that this is the law of the land, instead of that young lady not being able to, it gives the young lady access to go to federal courts to get relief. Because even though we know Mississippi for being oppressive and not having laws for us, it's like, well, bump that, because like fuck the Mississippi Supreme or the Mississippi state courts. I now can get into federal court, have my case heard, and also get the relief that I need. So it kind of gives people, particularly people like in those states that were in circuits that said that LGBTQ people cannot bring these claims, it gives them kind of a way to circumvent like their state judicial system and go directly into the federal system. And now they can bring these claims, and in the event that the claims are appealed to their circuits, it's like, well, we don't have an issue of whether trans or gay people are not protected under this law. They are protected, so we're going to throw it back to the trial court, and you need to give this person the relief for the discrimination that they experience. So, like,
I love that. So it allows us to be able to now move it to a different forum.
well, yeah. So yeah, we could, yeah, and typically you want to get into the federal court system anyway because they're more overall. While there are splits, the federal courts have traditionally over time they've been more lenient or helpful to minorities as a whole. Like even going back to civil right, like the civil rights movement back in the 60s and race, a lot of the things that jumped off were because of Supreme Court decisions about racism that was occurring like in Atlanta, Georgia, and Birmingham, Alabama. So it kind of gives you a way um, to get out of the state courts, and therein lies the problem with a lot of conservatives. Why they really why typically they don't like a lot of federal government involvement. They want to just allow the states to keep on acting independently, which leads to them discriminating against their marginalized communities. Like they want to maintain that state power. And what this decision says, like a lot of the same-sex marriage decision, like a lot of the Supreme, like Love v. Virginia with interracial marriages. What this does is it's like now you have another avenue to get relief, especially if you're in a state that doesn't recognize your gender identity or your sexual orientation. And it means a lot for people that live in states like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, a lot of those oppressive states that are unwilling to recognize LGBTQ rights. It gives folks another avenue to get into the courts so they can get some form of justice. Typically, it'll be like monetary relief for the discrimination. So In essence, that's what that means.
That's dope, sis. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, so I'm really happy about the decision. Because even for me, I've I've been entertaining the idea of moving down south just because, I want to own my own home. Like, there's just certain things that you can do living down south that you can't do living up north, as far as money and economics and all of that. But I
Yeah.
am very aware to the systemic and cultural values about being a Black trans woman living in the South and the realities of what that looks like, especially as somebody that wants to work, wants to be able to take care of themselves, and knowing that there's a possibility that if I'm in a state that doesn't have any anti-discrimination laws at the state level, right, that
Uh-huh.
there's a chance that I could be fired for being trans and not having any avenue to get any relief to compensate myself for the experience that I've been through.
Right. Well, I mean, and so this is exciting. So, have you given any deeper thought to moving to Atlanta? Because we would love to have you.
Well, I'm still thinking about it. It's still on the table. It would have to be a couple of more things in place, but the possibilities are endless. Like, and that's the beauty of this decision. It gives people more options, and it gives people more freedoms to be able to navigate and to move. But Atlanta's definitely an option. Nashville is an option. Dallas and/or Houston is an option. So I'm still entertaining the idea. I know I have a year or two in me to live in New York. I definitely want to have that experience, but this decision just opens so many doors for me to feel comfortable to move down there and to be able to get work and to protect myself. So I'm very thankful for this. And I think it should also be noted that the sacrifice, and like we brought up on a previous episode when we talked about Amy Stevens, the sacrifice that Amy made, and because she got fired from her job, because of her being in poverty, because of her not being able to afford the medical treatments that she needed to sustain her life. These are the type of situations that happen when people with power are allowed to discriminate against us, and it's so easy for us to go back into poverty because we are marginalized and we have this marginalized identity. So I really want people to recognize that the collateral consequences of being of experiencing people being transphobic to you, like it has real life consequences that you ultimately end up making sacrifices that you don't even get to live to see the benefit of those sacrifices.
Word. That's so true. So true. And God, rest in peace for her. I mean, but I will say her legacy continued, and it's powerful. And that's why it's important that we, in this world, in this day and time now, that we don't allow people to push us over, because you never know. That woman had no idea when she was working her job all those years that this would happen, and that she would be in a place where she would change laws for the entire country. So that just goes to show you can be just a little guy, and if you really are persistent and you are the type of person that is willing to pursue it, you can pursue it.
Right.
And you can make lasting change for the world.
Right. So I am happy about this decision, and I'm just happy. Like, this was, and I was nervous because the composition of the Supreme Court, it really could have went the other way. Like, it honestly could have went the other way. And it's while this episode will be dedicated to uh our next this decision and our next steps forward as the trans community, it should also be interesting to note that the Supreme Court declined to hear a case on reevaluating the doctrine of qualified immunity and whether it should be abolished, because it's like, we as a community, particularly us as Black trans people, it's like we never can go all the way with our wins. It's like when we get one thing, it feels like we lose something else. So but also it's a reminder that we have to keep on fighting so we can liberate everyone. But yeah, we either gonna have to get rid of that doctrine of qualified immunity, or we're gonna continue on our path to defunding the police, so we lessen the amount of interactions between police officers and Black people, so we won't even have to analyze whether the police officer is entitled to qualified immunity.
Can you explain what qualified immunity? I mean, I kind of know, and I was able to pick up the context clues just from our conversations, but if you could explain to our listeners right now, what is qualified immunity?
So qualified immunity is a doctrine that shields police officers when they are being sued over civil rights violations. So basically, it's a doctrine that protects police officers when they engage in misconduct by simply saying that, well, it if they did an action during the course of their job or in furtherance of their job, then they cannot be held civilly liable for any damages to citizens because it was done in the furtherance of their job. And the problem with this doctrine is that this doctrine has been used to justify a lot of the harms that police have caused to people, particularly Black and brown people, especially when they're acting outside of the scope of their employment. So that's another piece of qualified immunity. So when you bring a qualified immunity claim, the plaintiff, you really have to show, in order to show that the police officer is not entitled to qualified immunity, and excuse me, qualified immunity is a defense that the police can bring to shield themselves from like a civil rights 1983 claim of like excessive force or failure to intervene, or like any one of like the claims of
So in using it into relation to the George Floyd case, the Asian officer that was standing there, and then so I think allegedly there was another Black officer out of frame that were guarding what was happening and keeping people away. They, under this doctrine, would be able to say, I was in the duty of doing my police work, so therefore I can't be liable for failing to intervene.
Right. So basically, like the qualified immunity, you can make a defense. Well, me standing there, that was within the scope of my employment, and because it was within the scope of my employment, I can't then be held like I can't be held civilly liable because I was acting within the scope of my employment. Well, what has happened is that through a lot of bad case law, that police departments or police officers have been able to widely expand what the scope of their employment as police officers include, which is often like a lot of murder and violent harm of Black and brown and queer people. So you have had police officers that have killed Black and brown people on the job when they weren't supposed to do it, or they were clearly overstepping their boundaries, but because of bad precedent and this law that police lawyers have been able to use, they've been able to successfully argue that, hey, they're entitled to use qualified immunity because based on this case that happened X amount of years ago, this counts as this was within the scope of their employment. So the reason that this doctrine we want to get it to the Supreme Court is we want the Supreme Court to say, hey, y'all need to really give us an answer. Is this qualified immunity or is not? Ideally, with the pro citizen side, us wanting to narrow the scope of what constitutes scope of employment. And basically, we want to say, if you're killing people while you're in uniform, that is clearly beyond the scope of the employment. But what happens with a lot of courts is that they don't want to be tasked with oversight and over management of police departments because it's like, well, it's too inconvenient, or we would have to it would
like, oh, we would have too many cases.
Right. It was like the floodgates argument. It's like, oh, it would flood the courts with litigations, and we don't want to have to be tasked with providing oversights for these individual departments. So we just want to let them do whatever they want to do because it's just too much work for us. but people are literally dying and being able to escape liability, at least civilly, behind. And we're not even talking about a criminal, um, on a criminal scale. We're talking about civilly. You're able to escape civilly and not have to pay these families who you ruined their family for generations from now. So I like I said, it's great on one end that we got the Title VII ruling that we want, but as a black trans woman, the fact that the Supreme Court, and I don't know what the split or the breakdown was for how many had to vote for the court to review it, but the fact that we couldn't even get the court to even, with everything that's going on, with all of the black people that are continuing to get murdered even after George Floyd, that we can't get the court to really, really do away with this doctrine. Because just because you are a police officer, I don't feel like you should be entitled. Personally, I don't feel like you should be entitled to qualified immunity. But that just makes me more passionate about the defending the police movement, the demilitarizing the police movement, and really getting the police up out of here and creating alternative forms of community safety and public safety and things like that.
You know what? You also touched on something very powerful just now that's related to this. I think part of the problem that people had, even why we had to have this LGBT decision made, is because people are afraid of change. And I feel like this defund the police movement is the latest thing that is the de rigueur thing to like be afraid of. And I don't think people realize that what we're saying is we're not trying to say defund the police, leaving communities vulnerable to any and everybody. We're saying take down the prison industrial complex, make it to where the police are responsible for keeping peace and order rather than being the agents of chaos. Let's actually make sure that they have a police accountability to community, more community involvement in policing, and let's dismantle this prison industrial complex. And I feel like this decision is not any different in the sense that what we're saying is that you have to let society and culture evolve to embrace all people and let all people live to a certain respectable level of equity. Just like how we deserve to work as trans folk, Black people deserve to be able to navigate freely. And I love that on this podcast, we do both. We're able to talk eloquently about both sides of who we are, because we are multifaceted individuals, but these are the two sides that are oftentimes put against one another. And I love that we are able to marry, not just in our identity, but in our words and our messaging, that both are relevant and both matter.
Right. And I guess just pivoting to the next topic. So what does this ruling mean going forward, or what is next? Because I've had some people inbox me and they were like, so do we even need the Equality Act? Like, are we done? And it's like, no, we're not done. This ruling was a major tool for us to now use, but like, please don't get it twisted. Just because we had this ruling, it doesn't mean that people are going to stop discriminating against us, or stop treating us badly, or stop being transphobic. But like I said earlier, now we have an additional tool that when they do it, that we can then go sue them for money, for a lot of money. And, typically the money, the remedy of money is a deterrent for people to not engage in bad behavior, which is kind of true, but really not. Because if people know that all they have to do is pay you they can treat you wrong, and then the only disadvantage is that they have to pay you off. Well, they're just going to put more money into their insurance for their lawyers, or their insurance when they have to settle these lawsuits. So this is just one little bitty tool. And also, this ruling does not, like, we still have issues in housing and education.
Right.
And this this section of Title VII does not apply to those particular areas and the laws that govern those. So this is why, and this is pivoting to my topic, this is why we still need the Equality Act. It's a shame that the Equality Act has not passed yet. Just like a little refresher for what the Equality Act
I was
is. The Equality Act, they've actually been trying to get this bill to pass for some time now. But in its essence, it's a bill that I believe would be an addendum or like a new form of the Civil Rights Act that would protect all people, that would protect all protected categories of people on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, in the areas of employment, in the areas of housing, education. Like this act is supposed to remedy everything. So we don't have to rely on a Supreme Court that is heavily politicized to vote in our favor, or we don't have to do these piecemeal solutions where we have to wait on the perfect plaintiff or the perfect set of facts in order to bring the case. Like, if Congress was doing its job, we could have gotten this bill passed through the House, which I think it did pass through the House, but it didn't go through the Senate. And that's usually where we start out at. But we still need the Equality Act, because what we know and what history has taught us, that even with these landmark Supreme Court rulings, the other side, they just find more inventive and crafty ways to practice their bigotry, but to keep it concealed and not to be overt with it. The same thing has happened with race. The same thing, like history shows us that when this pendulum swings one way, it swings back the other way, and the other side gets more inventive and more crafty. So we need the Equality Act to kind of and to address everything, to protect everybody, particularly the most marginalized groups of people, so that at least in this area, it can be done once and for all, and we don't have to keep waiting for these cases, and we don't have to keep waiting for these judges.
I have a question. So this is so does the Equality Act also protect our ability to be insured by providers and things of that nature? Because I know that that's something also that the president has recently allowed, was the executive order that he sent down, allowed for providers, or at least insurance providers, to no longer be required to cover trans individuals. And there was writing in there that indicated that if you are trans and your insurance does decide to keep you, that they're not required, that they must go off of sex as designated as assigned at birth. So like, a lot of our trans procedures may not cover, even if they're not actively throwing away people. So what was there, sis? What were you gonna?
Well, I don't really recall if it would cover healthcare. I'm not really sure on that. I know it was definitely supposed to cover like public accommodations. I'm not sure if insurance and all of that will be covered under that. But the Obama administration had already came out with recommendations regarding treatment of trans people through healthcare services. But because of Trump, he's rolled back those protections. But I'm pretty sure that now that's something that could be included or could be written into the act. But the act, it was, so I'm looking at it now. It says that it would this act would amend the Civil Rights Act, which already protects the categories of race and gender and sex, to also prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in employment, housing, public accommodations, public education, federal funding, credit, and the jury system. So it would cover all of these areas, which is why it was so important when we did the census this year. That's why people were so up in arms when the Trump administration purposely removed gender identity and sexual orientation and other indicators from the census, because if we're not counted in those discrete particular ways, it justifies them not providing our communities with funds and resources that are allocated by the federal government, and it continues to promote this erasure of our communities, and it
Mhm.
allows the people in power to keep mistreating us in the ways, and the government to keep mistreating us in the ways that they have. So we need to keep up this momentum. We need to get behind this legislation. Also, get behind legislation of police. Well, we can't even call it police reform because I don't even think that's what we want anymore. Because even with police reform, it wasn't enough. And I know President Trump signed some irrelevant police reform thing, but it's not enough. It's not enough, and we have to again. We have to Oh, excuse me. We have to. We can't just one victory stop our momentum. There's just so many other things that we do. But to answer the question that people have been asking me, this is not this decision, the Amy Stevens case. This is not the end all be all. It only applies to employment and employment discrimination. But we have all of those categories. And somebody was asking me, could you use the same like legal strategy for employment discrimination, for like housing and other, and I simply said no, because it's different, because it's different areas of law, it's different burdens of proof, it's different structures, and I believe only employment discrimination is where you can bring a disparate impact claim. And I don't believe that you can bring a disparate impact claim if you're claiming educational discrimination or public housing discrimination. And even with the ruling that we got on the Amy Stevens case, because of bad case law, and because, to be honest, the majority of the Supreme Court favor, because we live in a capitalistic world, the Supreme Court and a lot of the court systems, they're going to favor big business. So a lot of and I won't go in depth because I don't want to confuse y'all, because I know some of y'all are probably confused, but because of the case law, particularly in the area of employment discrimination, the Supreme Court has really watered down, um, through its Supreme Court decisions throughout the decades, has really watered down the power and the effectiveness of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, because in case after case after case, it gives big business employers it gives them loopholes to escape liability for discrimination. So pivoting back to employment discrimination. So when you bring a employment discrimination claim, it employs like a burden shifting framework. So if I say X corporation has discriminated against me, I must first bring proof that, hey, you discriminated against me.
Oh,
Then said employer is allowed to bring evidence to say, no, we didn't discriminate against you, and this is why. So
uh-huh.
then it's back on me to show that if they're even if they do have evidence, it's pretext for something else, which sounds really simple in nature. But when you're one little plaintiff trying to go against a big corporation, and they rebut what you're saying with all of this evidence that they spent millions and millions of dollars on, or they had these army of lawyers, it's kind of hard for you, the plaintiff, to overcome, because basically when they bring that evidence, you kind of have to disprove and address everything. And if you don't address everything, you could lose your case at the summary judgment stage before you even get to a trial.
What's the
And
with what's the movie name with Julia Roberts, where she's an attorney that actually goes against one of those big corps with the big lawyers?
Aaron Brockovich.
Erin Brockovich, I think, is a great for our listeners that kind of want to get an idea of what she's talking about. That's an example. The Erin Brockovich a movie isn't a great example of what she's discussing, how one person going against a big business is a really, really big deal, and how most people just simply just don't have the capacity to address it. And that's how these corporations win. And when these cases get to the big courts, a lot of times small plaintiffs have tired out. Their funds have exhausted, and at this point, what kind of defense can you actually mount to such an army?
Right. So it's not, so a lot of times it doesn't really come down to who's right or wrong. It comes down to the jurisprudence, and it comes to who has the most money to battle these big corporations, because these corporations are willing, they literally, because they're not taxed the way that they should be by the government, they literally spare no expense when it comes to defending these employment discrimination claims, and they will literally they will put more money into defending all of these various lawsuits than actually putting the money into their companies to create tangible long-term programs that remedies all of the racism and transphobia and like they're more invested in suppressing it than actually changing the culture of their organizations. And yeah, so while this ruling is great for us, the Equality Act would be better.
Right, because it would be more comprehensive, and it would ensure that regardless across the board, that there are protections in place to keep from discriminating on several indicators of life, not just employment.
Right. And like the employment discrimination law, this, at least the Supreme Court case law, it's just so bad for people that have been wrong and have been discriminated against. Because there's another theory, a mixed motive theory, that even after all of the burden shifting is done, if an employer, and this is Supreme Court law, if an employer could come up with an alternative reason while they fired you, even if the plaintiff showed that, hey, this was discrimination, if the employer could come up with an alternative reason why they would have fired you, the court is willing to side with them if they come up with another reason why
So
they could have fired you.
I harassed you every day, and I threatened that if you didn't change how you dress, I'm going to fire you. And then the day you come in 5 minutes late, I fire you. I can use the fact that you were 5 minutes late as
Right.
real reason why I fired you, instead of, even though I have all the evidence to prove you sent me emails threatening me about how I look and how I dress. It doesn't matter if I can say you were 5 minutes late.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just a lot of bad case law, particularly in employment discrimination. But the while I'm happy the work is not done, we still have more work to do. We have to turn our focus to um, defunding the police and these police systems, and also passing this Equality Act, so we don't have to wait on the next Supreme Court case. We don't have to, we need, and also getting these Republican senators out of office that purposely are stalling progress by not voting on stuff, by rejecting stuff. Like we got to get these senators out of office, because we could have been passed the Equality Act a long time ago. And also, when we're passing these legislations, going all the way, we're not leaving anybody on the table. We're not leaving Black people off the table. We're not leaving incarcerated people off the table. We're not leaving trans and gay people. Take all of us, or don't give us the law at all. Because if you do that, we're going to be in the same situation another 50 years from now, because we left people behind.
Exactly. I'm so happy for this impartation that you just gave us, girl. Because to be honest, I don't think anywhere else right now are you guys going to be able to get what she just gave you from a Black queer lens, from a Black trans woman doing a podcast right now. And I'm just proud to say that I'm a part of this historical moment, even in just you being able to get your gifts on this platform to help educate our listeners on the nuances of these laws and why things matter, and why we can't get excited when we get these small victories and forget that this is just one battle in a great war that will have to be fought on multiple fronts. And I love that you were able to pivot and answer my questions. Thank you so much, Brianna. And this is just confirmation that I am in the right place with the right person.
Thank you. And thank you guys for supporting us. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Thank you for getting the word out there. And in addition to becoming sponsors of our show, continue to share our show, continue to talk about our show, continue to get the word out there. Like I said, we are very grassroots. We are starting from the bottom and we're going to get to the top. But just continue to share us on your network, put us on. I don't think anybody is doing it how we are doing it. And I honestly feel like we have a good product. Also, do you want to promote the live this Friday?
I would love to promote the live this Friday. So here at Box Number 512 Podcast, we understood that it was imperative that we find a way to be able to engage with our listeners. And we were aware that in this time, particularly this time of COVID and in the situation that we're in, where we're all kind of in a still place, that people would want to engage with us the best way they could. And we decided to take advantage of technology, and we formed what is now our thing, which has its own listenership, and it's the Box Number 512 Live After Show, which airs every Friday. Now, as our real listeners, as I'm sure you already know, our podcast airs every Friday at noon. And so sometime that afternoon, Brianna and I like to go live so that we can shake the Casbah and have conversation and fellowship and engage with you guys. And so when you do tune into our live after show, we ask that you just please engage. We want to hear. This is where, if you have questions, we have thoughts. We're using a new system now so we can see your comments on the screen and they're scrolling. So please, 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 guys, tune in to Box Number 512 Podcast After Show Live every Friday on Facebook, on Instagram, and on the Box Number 512 page. We love you guys, and we thank you guys for engaging with us. And before we leave, I also wanted to just take the time to dedicate this podcast to Amy Stevens. Thank you so much for your life. Your legacy will live on forever because you chose to stand up against oppression. And I feel like that makes you a warrior to the very end. And even though you didn't live to see your victory, your victory is in the record books and will be shared forevermore as someone that stood up to the big guys and won.
Yes. Until next time, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Box Number 512.
And don't forget to subscribe and like all of our pages on social media.
And don't forget to subscribe so you can see what we'll stock on the shelf next week. Bye.